Welcome back everyone. In the last video we spent some time ripping one of our maple boards into two halves, and we talked about repeating that process over the other boards that we had. So in your kit you received 4 boards. You should now have 8 boards as you're going into the step of gluing up your cutting board. 2 maple, 2 African mahogany, 2 walnut, and 2 purple heart boards. Now, if you glued all of those together, you would end up with a 12-inch wide cutting board. The kit was to build a 10-inch wide cutting board, and it's perfectly fine if you use all of the boards and build a 12-inch wide cutting board. I will be demonstrating the glue-up process utilizing a caul block, or that's just simply a block of wood that helps align the others while they're under clamp pressure. And I will actually utilize one of the boards that we ripped out in our cutting process. For me, I'm going to choose to use one of the maple boards for this. To complete the glue up, you will need your boards, obviously, that you have cut. You will also need your Titebond 3 wood glue, and we're using, again, Titebond 3 because it is waterproof and it has a long open time. It would be wise to use some wax paper, and in my demonstration I will be using this wax paper. We got it from Dollar General. It's very inexpensive. We will be using 2 6-inch clamps, and I will be utilizing 2 12-inch clamps. And the cutting board that I will glue up, again, will be roughly 10 inches wide by 16 inches long. We'll talk about laying out the boards and how we want to establish a pattern. It can be very random or it can be very regular, and that will be strictly up to you. I choose to do mine one way and feel very free to do yours in another way that's visually appealing to you. You will need a damp rag of some sort, and I will be using a damp paper towel. We will use this to wipe off the excess glue. The more glue that we can remove from our cutting board surface after we glue it up, the easier it will be to not only sand but also finish. And so we don't want to leave excess glue on a project after we glue it up. So without further ado, let's get started on our glue up. So here we have the pieces of wood that are ready to be glued up and assembled into the cutting board. And I've chosen a more random pattern. I like having my boards a little more random. You could have them in a very symmetrical fashion, in any manner or any number of configurations. For example, if you wanted everything to be very symmetrical, you might choose to do something like this. Of course, you could include the other maple board in your glue up, but I'm choosing to do mine this way, and I like having the more, again, random pattern. Again, you could do it just any number of ways that you wanted to. In fact, maybe I'll do mine that way there and have the purple heart more in the middle. One thing I would like to say, as you're planning your layout and putting things together, pay attention to the edges. Again, we had our circle marks on the boards, and that was the planed and or jointed and planed faces. But you'll notice on this one, you have a lot of tool chatter and tear out. And so even though this face or this edge of this board is the glue surface, it could pose problems in your finishing if you put this to the outside. So simply check the other side of the board, and if you'll look on this board here I'm showing you, this side doesn't have any tear out. So therefore I would want to make sure to glue this edge to the inside so that all of that would disappear, and I'll have an easier time finishing my board. I have my wax paper, and I'm going to lay my cutting board pieces back on that wax paper. My clamps are ready to go into service, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and extend the clamp out so that it's close to the size that I need, so that I'm not having to deal with the clamp opening width after I get glue on my boards. So I'm going to do that to both clamps. set those aside. And now I'm going to turn my boards up on end, except for my last one. Now again, you want to, when your boards are turned up on end, you want to see that circle mark. And that's the mark we want to, the face of the board that we want to apply glue to. Now it'll be a little odd on these Purple Heart boards because they are smaller than the others. I'm going to use my finger to apply the glue. You could also use a craft paintbrush, but I want to apply a bead of glue to each of my boards. And if you don't get quite enough glue on it, that's okay. You can always add a little glue. And also, if you get a little too much glue on it, that's okay too, because we will be wiping the excess glue off. We will not apply glue to the last piece. I'm going to go ahead and start with this piece of Purple Heart, and I'm going to simply spread the glue on this board with my finger. And again, a small craft paintbrush could be just as effective. And if you're going to do a lot of projects, I recommend that, to get a small craft paintbrush. We'll move on to the next board. And you want to be sure to thoroughly cover the surface of wood with your glue. That's fine. I have my rag, my paper towels. Just gonna wipe that excess glue off of my finger. Now, we will take our clamp. Now, we are going to eventually trim the board on each end so that it will be square. So it's not imperative that we get everything perfectly lined up, I should say, but you do want to line it up as best as you can on the end. So then we will take our clamp, and I'm going to lay the bar of my clamp on the wood and then turn it down so that it makes contact with the face close to the table, and that the tips of the clamp actually rest on the table. And I'm going to clamp one end, and then I'm going to turn the other clamp the opposite way. I'm going to clamp the other end. And you can see that whenever I applied pressure with this clamp, it actually slipped and the glue up. And I can push that back. You can manipulate the boards. We want to apply enough pressure that we see some of the glue seep out a little bit. And you can see that. You may not be able to see it on the film as well, but there is a little bit of glue coming out. I'm going to take the rag and I'm going to wipe off the excess glue. In the event that your boards want to buckle under the pressure of clamping, you can use a caul block. And what you would have to do is readjust your clamps so that you have room for your caul block. And so I'll put that clamp over there. You'll take an additional piece of wax paper, put it down on your boards, and then you will actually clamp your boards against this board itself. So I'll turn it and I'll put my 6-inch clamp underneath the board, and I'll clamp down on this end. And you can, if your table has enough lip, you can clamp the call block to the table. I'm not doing that in this instance. Then I'm gonna come over here. Everything gets kind of awkward, but that's okay. And I'm going to clamp the other side of my call block. And so what I've done essentially is I've used the straightness of this call block to act as a rigid support for the boards that are being put under pressure as they try to buckle and heave under that pressure. Now, we've clamped our cutting board together, and now we would just leave this to dry for about an hour's time. Don't take it out of your clamps before an hour. So let it cure thoroughly.